Hi there, new demo for OpenAKC since we're approaching a 1.0 release, and I thought I'd do a quick demo of the features and some new scripts that I've added, including the automated setup of a demo/test environment. So having cloned the repo, you're going to find that you've got this directory, and inside contrib, you'll find that there's a script called Debian-LXC build and demo. And what this script will do is, if you run it as a non-root user, it will try to configure your system to support unprivileged LXC containers. And if you run it as root, it will just use the containers as root. It'll make sure that the right packages for LXC are installed, and then proceed to set up the containers for a sort of standard combined jump host / security server with a test client, and it will set up an admin user and a standard user on your sort of combined jump host environment, and a application user on your target machine. Do all the keys and everything to just set up a basic demo and test environment. So let's do that, and I'll show you how that works. Run contrib Debian. So here it's checking to see that you've got all the necessary packages installed on the system. And it says right, we found those. And if it finds the configuration files for unprivileged LXC containers, it's just going to assume that they work, which is a fair bet that we set them up previously. But if this doesn't work, then try running it as root as an example. And what it's going to do is it's going to create these two containers, and it explains what I've just explained, that the combined, and that's in the diagrams, there's a combined security server diagram, which you can see in the documentation or on the front of the GitHub page, and obviously the OpenAKC client. And so the next thing it's going to do is, if the containers already exist, it will destroy them, rebuild the containers, and recompile any of the C, and build new packages and install. It actually drops the new packages in your home directory, so you can use those later if you want to. So I'm going to press enter here, and it will. Obviously, it's using the download option. That's the only option which is available for a non-privileged container setup. These are pre-built LXC, sort of base, minimal server images like you would get for AMI from Amazon, and it's just going to download those. And once it's got those, it will start the build of it'll patch the containers, and then it'll start building the packages for OpenAKC. I'm just hoping it'll start before I'm going to spin on as soon as it starts. There you go. Yeah, so it's basically got the image, and there it's starting them up. It shows you that the containers were configured and they're now running, and now we're just starting to patch the containers. I'm going to pause now until the packages are built, because this will take several minutes. I should mention while this is proceeding that the bit at the start, if you don't have one of the necessary packages to run LXC, or the configuration is missing or something, it will add that configuration. It'll ask you for sudo password if it needs to do that, and under certain circumstances it will stop the script and say you either need to log out and log back in again, or reboot at this point, because we've installed some component which requires a reboot, or whatever. So don't be too surprised if that happens. I've tested this on Pop! OS 2004 and Ubuntu 18.04 and 20.04, as well as Debian 10. That's Buster, I believe. So should be reasonably stable. Although I have encountered a situation where under certain circumstances, if the downloadable image doesn't work properly, for example, I had one case where the downloadable image had a DNS error, so it couldn't look up the server to get the patches, etc. It got upset. So if you encounter that, then you can actually change at the start of the script. You can change what image it goes after. And I've also got a I think --DNS fix option, which you can see in the text file for the script. So you can if you do that, then it'll override whatever the image DNS has, and just point it towards Google 8.8.8.8. So just be aware that it's doing an awful lot at this point. So it's relying on those images working, etc. So if it fails to start those containers or something, there are a few options that you can use to get around it. Anyway, I'm going to pause again until this is done. Right, we're back. It's just finishing up. What it's doing here is it's created an admin user on your jump host, and it's created the SSH key with the passphrase admin key, and obviously that user needs to register their key, but there's no way to automate registering a key. So you have to enter that passphrase to the register key tool. You can see the output in white here is just the commands used to set everything up. Green turquoise is notes, and obviously gold is the actual OpenAKC tool. So this is suggesting here enter passphrase admin key, just so that key can be registered for the admin user account. And so I'm going to type in admin key, and then it's going to do the same thing for the normal user account. Note this error here. That is actually a bug in sudo, which generates that error in a container. It doesn't affect the operation, but that's actually in their bug tracker as supposedly going to be fixed at some point, just to get rid of the warning message. So by the time you run this, it may not say that, but if you see that message, it's not something you need to worry about. Right, so I'm going to enter user key there, and it will finish setting up the containers. What this is saying here is if you through a typo, you have to get OK request processed for both of these. Otherwise, you could stop now and just run it with no rebuild, no recompiler, no install, and that will just dump you back here so that you can re-enter those. But assuming you can type, press enter. It does a quick check to make sure that it can't connect at this point. Yep, permission denied. And now it's uploaded a set of rules for the app user at OpenAKC client machine. So there's the command you would have executed to do that. And we'll run that command in a second, just to show you. Well, we'll run edit role actually, just so you can see what rules it put in place, and then it says you can connect to the to your combined security server and jump host just by doing LXC attach to that machine there, and then you'd be the normal user, or you can become the normal user. And so let's do that. And just for the example, you should be able to just SSH to app user at OpenAKC client. It's going to ask you for the passphrase. You can see actually up here, that's what it tried to do here and got permission denied. So the fact that it added the rule at this point has allowed us to connect. So the passphrase here for normal user is user key. Did I type that correctly? Yes. Okay. So rather than dropping you straight into the shell, the OpenAKC system will catch your connection. This is an option in the configuration, whether quiz is turned on, and this is just a simple quiz to say, what are you going to do here? Do you have a change number? You can just press enter, or you can put in a description, testing, and with blank line to end. You can press enter again, and then if the option is enabled to display the restrictions, both this banner and these restrictions will be eventually an option. I think that in this version they're still not configurable, but by the time I do a 1.0 release, those will be configurable options. Right. So now we can log in, and it says here cap Linux immutable withdrawn, and that basically means that if this user becomes root, or if this was a root login, then this user cannot edit the immutable flag, which, if you're configuring the system to be secure, you could configure your security settings, SSH config, etc., so that even if someone does have root on the system, they're not able to edit those things. And so let's have a quick look at how it's set up. I'm just going to log another window on to this machine as root, so you can see what's actually configured on that machine. Just give me a second. I'm going to pause while I do that. Okay. So I've just attached as root to the OpenAKC client machine, and it's important to know that no local configuration was done on this machine, with the exception of configuring in etc. hosts, because the demo doesn't have DNS. I configured these two host names to be the combined server. Obviously, in a real environment, you'd have more than one machine. So the default package configures OpenAKC 01 and OpenAKC 02 as the default host names that are in the configuration. Obviously, if you didn't want to put CNAMEs in your DNS, or you wanted to have specific machines configured, then you can alter the configuration file, which is in etc. OpenAKC, and you'll see that there's a config file there which is deployed by the package. So those are the only changes that I made for the demo. Just the host file and the package install, and this is the default configuration, which is deployed by the package, which defines the two APIs. It can be any number, but it defines two APIs, and it says that yes, we're enabled this port we're using Cache time is not currently used, but it's there for future use. Debug, that's how much logging it generates. Data directory, this is if root is allowed. Now on a future release, I'm going to change this to a list of users which are denied, but the purpose of this is really so that you can say, well, is this, maybe if this machine doesn't belong to us, then the owner of the machine can still install the client and limit limit what access can be managed by the OpenAKC tool. Now, audit is just, are we sending back host configuration information from this machine? Quiz is whether the user is quizzed at the login as to what their purpose for logging in is. And fake sudo is a local logging feature. So let's have a look at the log file so you can see what that does in file log. Okay, so in auth.log, you're going to see the OpenAKC plugin logs says user app user authenticated on OpenAKC and OpenAKC client, sorry, IP address, session ID using key this, which is normal user. And that is the standard log, but if you have fake sudo turned on, you're going to get this log as well, which reports exactly the same information, perhaps some extra information as well, in the sudo format. And the reason for that is that a number of SIEM type, security management systems expect to see a sudo log, because a lot of people meet the security best practice by having users log on as the personal user and then escalating privilege. And this system is designed for you to log directly into an application or a role user. And so it generates these fake sudo logs so that your SIEM system or whatever log system is more comfortable with what's actually going on. And you can actually take this session ID and expand it directly into a keystroke, session recording, keystroke logging file. So you can actually tie that directly to what that user did. Anyway, let's go back to our original session. Let's just have a look around. We're obviously logged onto that machine. I can't really show you the capability restriction because there are no immutable files on this system. But can't do that. Anyway, it's clearly we're logged in, and yeah. So let's go back and show you how how that permission is set up. I'm just going to open another window and have that on as admin user so that we can switch back and forward. So just bear with me a moment. I'm going to pause you again. Okay, you've connected back to the admin user, and we can run OpenAKC, which is the universal tool for accessing the back end, even for both admins and users. So user would be able to register their key with this and not do a great deal else. But as an admin, you can do audit role app-user at OpenAKC-client. So obviously that's a user at host, and that's going to load a that'll load either VI or whatever editor is defined by the editor variable. And there's some comments there telling you what each of the directives means. So this is the key for the role definition, which is a date range, which in this example just goes to 2025 for the purpose of demo. It's a user login. That could be group, and then you define the group that's permitted to log in rather than an individual user. And then they can be restricted to a day of the week, time of the day. We can override the shell, so if you want to force someone into a restricted shell, do that. Or even if you want to force them into a particular role at a particular time of day, can only use restricted VI, or are one of the restricted editors, so that they can just edit a file and log out. If, for example, you had shell set to bin false or something, then you can list what commands they can run remotely. So if they're not allowed to have a interactive session, you can say, this account can only run whatever batch script you want. Here's an example for SCP. You can. This is obviously a sed command. You can sed script. So in here it says if the thing begins with slash, then replace that with /tmp. So now files can only be SCP'd in and out of /tmp, and not the whole system. So if you want to restrict people's ability to, essentially a chroot, so you wanted to restrict people's ability to only SCP files into a shared folder or something, you can do that. Obviously there's capability restrictions. That's a comma separated list. Record is session recording, and this is a comma separated list of IP addresses or CIDR subnets, the same as the default SSH configuration would allow there as well. And you can have multiple of these rules or groups of rules. So that this block is essentially a login rule. Rule or role kind of used interchangeably. And so this is the first mode of operation where it's used to mediate the users, and they can manage their own keys using that key registration process, which was done during the demo setup. I'll just come out of here and I'll show you. So if admin user had changed their key for some reason and wanted to re-register it, you could do OpenAKC register, and it's just going to ask for the passphrase just to verify that the person registering their key does own it. If I'd changed the key, it would be fine and it would still operate. Now that's the key for admin user logging onto things. That's not the same as the key that you need to define an OpenAKC user as an OpenAKC admin. Those keys are in .openakc. So essentially you place this public key here onto the server in the right location, and that gives this user permission to be an administrator as opposed to a user. Right. Just going to set up another demo for the other mode of operation, which would be where you, instead of having users manage their own keys, we're going to be centrally managing the authorized keys, essentially across the whole estate. You would obviously have to disable the authorized keys in the SSHD configuration on the client machines to stop the users from adding their own. But that authorized keys file can be set to dev null, SSH will happily not use local key files and just let OpenAKC define them. So just going to pause you while I set that up. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do SSH keygen, and I'm going to generate a new key for admin user. I'm just going to use admin user because it's there, and it's I don't have to create a new one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a key that's different to the normal key that admin user registered. So this is essentially a statically defined trust that we're going to add as if we were creating a key and adding it to authorized keys. So we'll create ID test, and this time with no passphrase because static trust doesn't require passphrase, whereas users it is enforced that users have a passphrase. So we now have a new key, and you'll notice, we need to submit that key. So open AKC, submit, and I'm going to submit obviously I'm submitting the public key to the system. And we're going to put a comment on there that says admin users okay, there we go. Okay, so that's stored the key and it gives it a serial number, which is quite important. It's well worth making a note of which of these serial numbers is which. So I'm going to copy that now, and we're going to go back and we're going to edit the role for logging into app user, and we are going to grab the configuration that was already there and add a new one. Just copy what was already there. So we have exactly the same, except this time I'm going to change the key type or the authentication type to key, and we're going to replace the username with the key serial number, and we'll just leave the rest of it the same, and save that, and that's role data updated. So if the admin user now tries to log in to that user, it's going to get denied because it's not using our new test key. So it's asked for a password, and ideally you would disable passwords on your servers, or at least via SSH, so that then it would say public key denied. But if we go back here and we say I want to use identity.sh/id_test, now this should act as though we added that to the authorized keys file for that user and give us a session. Notice it didn't ask us for a passphrase for that, because that key that we added, this is for static trust, didn't have a passphrase. So we could put in a description. This was a static key, blank line, and we just get the same. Thing. There is, I think, a hint in the environment that says that this is an OpenAKC session, but otherwise nothing you could tell from any other type of session. So we'll log out of there. And if I go in, actually, I'll show you another. The reason why it's using a serial number, you can also use a key fingerprint instead of the serial number, but the reason why it uses a serial number for the key is if you had changed the key, let's just generate a new one. If you change the key, say for example, someone discovered the key, or you're allowing a third party in, and they've said, okay, we have a policy to rotate these keys every month, and they've given you a new key, and you don't want to go into the permissions that grant them access to everything. So we're going to overwrite the old key with a new one, and just going to go and submit an update to this serial number, which is the serial number we got in the first place, and that's going to replace the key with the new one. And we don't have to change any rules, but we can, if I can find the command. Yep, we should just be able to log in still. No authorized keys files to update across the entire estate. We've updated that key, and so any rule that allows access via that key will continue to operate. And we can do exactly as we did before, etc. Right, and one other thing that's definitely worth mentioning on the actual security server, which obviously in this case is combined with your jump host, there is in the data directory varlib OpenAKC. This is the data store directory. So anything in there is essentially subject to change, and that's ideally, well, it has to be replicated between any systems that are part of the same cluster, so that keys registered to that are available to any servers in the same cluster. In future, you'll be able to use a database instead, but since it really relies on users having their personal keys, you need to have shared storage, NAS, or replicated storage for their home directories. So the default is to store the data in a folder in here. So you don't really want to touch that. There's an audit directory, which inside audit for each machine, there's going to be a list of how the routing and swap, how network is set up, etc. So let's just network. So you can see what's on that machine. It will collect more or less depending on whether you log in as root or not. And this will also eventually be configurable in a libxx, so you could define your own information to collect from there. Keys, obviously, these are keys. So this is the admin user public key that allows them to be admin. And then there is the client and server public key, or public and private key pairs. So the server one is what it uses to communicate with the client, your plugins on all your client machines, and the client one is installed by the tools package, and that's what allows the users to register keys. And if you have a separated system where your security server and your jump host are on different machines, you'll need to copy this public key from the jump host onto the security server so that your users are able to register their keys. If you do that, it's very critical that the security server and the jump host, or wherever your users are registering keys from, use the same directory server, whether that's AD or LDAP or whatever, because otherwise you're going to have all sorts of problems, because it's going to be checking the user's group information on the security server, but if they're registering keys with usernames from from another machine, so by placing that on there, you're essentially certifying that they're using the same directory information. Obviously, if you're only interested in managing static trust via authorized keys, essentially managing that kind of trust, then you don't need that. You don't need that at all. If you replace these keys, you're going to need to clear the public keys from all the clients as well, because they will stop communicating. Right, and the one last thing else to show you in here is the key logs, which is essentially session recording. It's going to create a data structure for the date, and then put log files in there with information about the time, which user we're talking about, on which host, and we've got which of your users or which key was granted that login, and then there's the session ID, which you can grab from that's the session ID, isn't it? Which you can grab from the log file. So if we take that file there and look in that, you can see that's what happened during that session. So we didn't put in a title, put some summary information in there. It'll tell you where the connection came from, what key was used, what type of terminal, some terminal information, what shell was used, etc. And obviously session logging is enabled, so after that we actually get the session log, which shows exactly what we did in that session, and then exit and the log out. There's some tools that will turn these VT100 encoded files into HTML, so that you could then hook this into an Apache server and have a nice sort of interface to view that. May get around to adding something like that to contrib eventually, but it's fairly easy to do that yourself if you're interested. Please feel free to contribute to the project, indeed, if you do. Right, I think that's kind of it. If you we'll go back to which session we're going back to. We go back to the admin user, and you can take this key. If you want it to remove it, you can do delete. So we're going to update this key serial number by deleting it, and okay, we've deleted that public key. And now if we try an SSH using that key, it's going to ask for a password and not allow us to log in again. And if we now put in a new key, then we'd need to go back into the rules and change the serial number. You can actually delete users' keys as well, perhaps if just for housekeeping, if they were perhaps had left the company. So if I said admin user, should be able to delete admin user's key, and then admin user would not be able to log in. Actually, if I delete the normal user's key, and we go back to the normal user window, is it that one? Well, that one. There we go. And we try to SSH, and we can't because that key was deleted. But because normal user still exists and is able to log in, and is still in a position to register a key, that normal user could go OpenAKC register user key, and then they would be able to log in again. So obviously there's no benefit in deleting those keys unless you also disable the users. If it was a static trust that you've deleted, obviously the only way to put it back is to resubmit it, and then you get a new serial number, and you have to you would need to update the rules to reflect the new serial number for that key. So if you want to temporarily disable it, you might just want to go in and edit the key, maybe change the key dash to disabled or something, or just change the date range that key is usable for. I'll leave that to your discretion as to how you set that up. And that's pretty much what we're doing. You can manage all of your SSH trust, and the only thing that needs to happen on the client machines is you install the package, and either have the default host names in your DNS, maybe a CNAME, or with your deployment, deploy the OpenAKC configuration file to define which servers, which are your security servers, and then users can register their own keys, assuming you're allowing that. If you're not allowing that, then you can remove the keys from the keys directory, and then only admins you would be able to operate. So no user keys would be able to be registered, and so you would only be able to use it for static trust. But in this mode where users are registering their own keys, the assumption is that your jump host and your security server, whether they're the same or not, not the same box, have access to some directory, whether that be LDAP or AD or whatever, but that's not required on any of the servers that you're connecting from. And as an example, you could, for example, install the tools package on a completely different machine that's outside of this environment completely, and then take that key from Valib OpenAKC that's installed by the tools package, that particular tools package that was installed on that machine, put that in the directory on the security server, and then you'd be able to manage the rules from that machine as well. So that can be a remote management kind of situation. Obviously, if you have multiple security servers, you need to put the keys from all of them into, cross-pollinate those keys. The reason it works in the sort of simple setup where there's a single host is because the packages put the keys in the same location. So if you install the server and the tools package on the same machine, the keys all go in the same folder, and so it just magically works. But you do need to bear in mind that if you're configuring multiple machines, or you're configuring machines separated, that you need to set up that trust, otherwise it doesn't work, or the security will stop you from editing permissions, which is obviously a good thing. And that's kind of the end of the demo. I hope that's been helpful. Feel free to drop me a message on GitHub or email or whatever. I'd love to have some feedback and testing for this. But there we go. Thank you very much.